At the end of the day, what I want to tell your listeners is that whether you're an emergency physician or not, but you have aspirations to do something different, maybe something you've never done before, my encouragement is always try it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You learn that maybe flopped at it. I've failed many times as well in other ventures. So I think it's important just to keep trying, keep growing, put yourself out there, take the risk, and see what happens.
This is the Visible Voices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Audience, before I tell you about today's guest, I wanted to share that we are taking an end of the season break and will return right after the summer holiday. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Mizuho Morrison, emergency physician, educator, entrepreneur, podcaster, and an overall fantastic person who has defined the many ways a physician can wear success. Mies is the Chief Medical Officer of MRAP, that's Emergency Medicine Reviews and Perspectives, the most listened to audio program in emergency medicine with more listeners than the total number of emergency physicians in the United States. She has a medical educator and podcaster portfolio, which includes HIPPO education, urgent care reviews, and essentials of emergency medicine. Mies is an early adopter of medical side gigs, such as, for example, her 2014 startup, 3 Mommy Doctors LLC, or 3MD. You're about to learn a lot in today's conversation. Mies, the early adopter in designing one's professional career, Mies, the visible voice, and Mies's perspective on how AI is playing a role in medical education. Let's get to the conversation. Okay, so Mies, not everybody will know about CorePendium or about MRAP. For listeners, can you give them the 101?
So the 101 is MRAP is a leading source of emergency medicine education in all the formats. So we're talking audio, we have multiple podcasts, we have video series, fundamental videos, procedure videos, et cetera. And then we have CorePendium, which is our online, ever-growing textbook / encyclopedia, essentially everything you need to know to treat patients in the emergency department, as well as the urgent care, any acute care setting. And it breaks down not just the clinical course of various diseases, but also there's a pharmacopoeia, there's a clinical calculators embedded. It's this massive product. It's a company within our company, to be quite frank. We have 800 authors, 3 editors in chief. It's a massive project. Quite remarkably, I mean, back when you and I trained, Resa, there was big textbooks that we use. This is essentially, all those textbooks and more as we continue to learn. It literally updates daily. So it's quite remarkable.
And to your point, when we were in training, there were textbooks at the back of the emergency department that we would run back to, open it up, flip through. And then over time, we have smartphones that then we could have these apps and these ways to look up references on our phone. Then podcasts really became mainstream. And now it's an actual integration tool, ideally in the electronic health record. And that brings me to AI. So as CMO of MRAP, you're at the forefront of medical education innovation, both the business product, the business platform, as well as the education. Where and how is AI playing a role?
Such a good question. I think if you're going to be doing anything in technology and certainly in education, it's important to sort of be aware of AI and embrace it as much as possible, but also know how to integrate it and how not to. I think one of the fundamentals of our company, and certainly how it started, was we are a trustworthy source, right? We are a reliable source. Mel Herbert, who is the CEO, founded the company on that. He was relatable. He would recruit, his colleagues who were experts in the field. They were essentially a trusted source. It was highly peer reviewed, vetted, et cetera. So 25 years later, that continues. That is the gold standard within our company. And we continue to try and uphold that in all formats, whether it's audio, video, or CorePendium. And the problem with AI, at least currently in summer of 2025, is that we're just not just the technology is just not there. My understanding from my tech folks who we have in-house and also experts outside say that this is called the black box effect, where apparently as these sort of chat GPT engines are being developed, the more information you're putting in, we're actually seeing less accurate results being spit out. So it's interesting. It's nothing we're doing. We're seeing this sort of like everywhere with many companies. So until that technology sort of gets to a better, more accurate place, I think this is where the teeter-totter of keeping up with the tech, but also not compromising the content is absolutely critical for us. We have spent 25 years building a reputable source. It would be foolish of us to let all of that go by adding an AI search that then, kind of destroys the trustworthiness of it.
100%. You've talked about and you exemplify emergency physicians who are natural risk takers. And we do all sorts of things. In fact, people get confused, I'm sure, by the different roles you've played, the hats you've worn. And I, too, when I explain to people the things I do, they're like, wait a minute, so you don't just work in an office or just work in an emergency department? And I say yes. But you have aptly described emergency physicians as risk takers. We're used to walking into an undifferentiated situation, an undifferentiated patient, and we can bring in and compute many different sensory inputs. Discuss.
So, for those who aren't emergency physicians, yeah, I mean, to paint the picture, right? We are trained to be the jack of all trades, somewhat the master of none, right? And yet, it takes a certain odd personality to be quite frank. I think of our specialty. I mean, it's not normal, right? When you have someone who's languishing or actively dying, that's a scary thing, and most people want to run away. Our personalities, we are very attracted to that. We want to run in and help fix and save that person, which is remarkable, obviously, and has other downstream negative effects. But the positive side of that is that it takes someone with a significant courage and vulnerability, right? And the ability to walk into a very chaotic situation, bring organization to it, take risks, make active decisions very quickly that are life and death. And that inherently, and then be able to pivot. Like, you can walk into a resuscitation of someone actively dying and then have to walk out 20 minutes later to go take care of someone's sore throat or their, cut on their knee or whatever it is. So that ability to compartmentalize and the ability to move quickly and make these decisions all are character traits. And I teach this all the time to people who are interested in doing other things, but it makes for an amazing entrepreneur. It makes for someone who is willing to take risks, willing to say, I don't know. I mean, I have people who've said, well, I'd love to write a book, but I have no idea how to do it. Well, here's the thing about our specialty is that you're right. I also don't know how to do cardiothoracic surgery, but I know how to get the ball rolling and then get the cardiothoracic surgeon involved when I need to, right? And so that's the same thing. You mentioned, 3Mommy Doctors, 3MD. It was a first aid kit company we developed for babies and kids. We didn't knew nothing about product development, and we had to go through FDA clearance and developing packaging and labels and all sorts of things that we didn't know, but you just figure it out, or look for other resources. So in my humble opinion, and what I teach often, is that emergency physicians are one of the best at starting new endeavors.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you brought up Three Mommy Doctors and that entrepreneurial experience, because that was one of the first ways you and I met. And I was wowed that you had started a company. And it was a little bit of that week, what? We can start companies? Well, yeah, of course we can start companies. You have really, though, highlighted within emergency medicine as clinicians the community doc and those who work in the community. And this has been, you have spent your time working as a physician in the community. And that can be very scary. Much more limited resources. You can be alone. And you actually have described one of your stories that maybe launched you into seeking other ways to build your toolkit was a very, very sick child in the community, maybe about 2 years old, who ended up being okay, but was very sick. And you were like, wait a minute, I need more training. I need to do more.
Yeah, I trained at LA County USC, which arguably was one of the best training programs, or is one of the best training programs for emergency medicine in, the country / the world. And when you're adult emergency trained, you do some pediatrics. And I had spent my, appropriate time in the peds ER. But every adult ER doctor will tell you that seeing a sick and dying child is one of the scariest things that you'll encounter. And I think I was a fourth year resident moonlighting in the community. And till this day, knock on wood, was by far the sickest under 2-year-old kiddo that I'd ever taken care of by myself. Again, we didn't have a peds ER. This was in a community shop in the middle of the night. And yeah, thankfully he survived, but it was um, a very humbling and frightening experience. And that alone made me go back to LA County as an attending and say, I'm just going to do shifts in the peds ER. And my adult colleagues thought I was nuts. But again, I hated that feeling of, sure, the kid survived. My entire team did the best we could. We shipped him out on a helicopter. I had to fly with this kid in a helicopter because there was no transport services. It was really a remarkable case. But all that to say, what I took away from that was, again, I need to run into fire, because I don't like that sense of not having the confidence in these really scary scenarios.
Yeah. Bravery, courage, leadership, and what you described for the audience, I agree with wholeheartedly. Rather than running away from these things, we run towards them and say, wait a minute, I need to get comfortable with this. Let me learn more. Let me do more.
Yeah.
One of the other things, one of the many things, but another thing that stands out to me is you've shared in my deep dive from other podcasts and reading that when you started residency, your first year as an intern, you were 8 months pregnant.
Yes.
So you started training and pretty soon thereafter took family leave. And I'm wondering what that experience was like
Mm.
and how that shaped you as a career physician.
You're right. My daughter, who is now 18, it tells you how many years it's been. But I remember interviewing for my internship. And this back in the day when we had a transitional internship and then a 2 through 4 year program for emergency medicine. And I remember kind of hiding my pooch. I was early pregnant, right? And so I didn't really disclose that I was pregnant. And then I got selected and I walked in as an 8 month pregnant intern. Yeah. And this was back in the day when we had no duty hour, restrictions. So we were working a good 100 hours a week easily, running around the hospital. And it was, I think I don't really know what, I have no other comparison. And so I will not lie and say it was easy. I would come home from a 40-hour on call shift to a newborn who needed to be breastfed, and I pumped and, did all the things. Wanted to quit many times. I felt the struggle of motherhood and being a resident. And I remember a couple of pivotal people then that really stopped and encouraged me. I was going to give up breastfeeding because it was just too hard. And my girlfriend, who was also my senior resident, said, no, you can do this. She was a single mom. She's like, you can do this. And certain people throughout my training that really kind of helped guide me along. There weren't a lot of parent residents when I was training. The experience now is so much better. And yet I still think that, our specialty in particular, because it's so quote gnarly or hardcore, there was the sense of, if you choose family or choose to be a mother or a father or whatever, you're sort of sacrificing your ability to be as good of a physician as you could be. And there was a, undertone of sort of criticism.
Yeah.
That was hard. That was hard. And yet, I swore I would not get pregnant again during residency. And then my fourth year, I did get, and my son, who's now 14, was born in my senior year. So, live and learn. And, but that experience of training and being a new mom, um, was both humbling, but also really eye opening for what is the priority of my decisions thereafter, and definitely shaped the decisions I made in terms of what does my career look like now, juggling two kids, and how do you do that, and how do you do it well. So yeah,
I
it's a
heard you on a podcast conversation with the team at Over Easy, and they were saying that, you sort of defined and really put out there this concept of the side gig and the side hustle. And we've already talked about some of these things you were doing.
mm,
And it's so interesting because 25 years later, I see what you're doing as actually quite normal for physicians. I think because it's become normalized to be a physician entrepreneur, to be a physician podcaster, to be a physician educator, a physician author, all those things that used to be like isolated as opposed to very much a part of the full career and fulfillment of a person, of a professional. You've actually said, I wanted more variety and was okay sacrificing the prestige of a full time academic physician.
for me, the experience was more like I left training and I was offered a full-time job in the shop that I had trained in, academic job. And I loved academics, but I was moonlighting in the community and I also loved community medicine. There was just something different. And really the difference is you're at a teaching hospital where you have literally access to every single subspecialist on the planet, and you have residents, you have worker bees, right, to help do your thing. And the stressor of that job is more teaching while also managing patient care. And that's a definite, certain, unique stress. Community job is very different. There's no worker bees. It's you, your nurse, your clerks, your team, your techs, and you're running around like a crazy person managing very sick patients essentially by yourself. You work in a silo. You have other colleagues, and that's the collegial part of it. And I loved both, Risa. I couldn't really choose one or the other. So I did. I literally did both for, I would say, the first 14, 13 years out of training was, and then my percentage of shift count would go up and down based on what I was doing. But I did, as you referenced earlier, some, pediatric emergency medicine at the academic shop, and, adult and pediatric care in the community shop. Yeah, that's how my sort of clinical decision started. But I think there was this, and much to your point, you say people ask you all the time, well, why aren't you okay just being in ER? Like, why is that not enough? I don't know. It just never was enough. I love emergency medicine. I really do. I love the patient care, but there's always been this sort of hunger and desire and longing to do more. And that's the part of sort of my decision making. I had to say, okay, am I okay not having that prestigious title, right? A full academic professor of whatever, or I'm not a full partner in my community group and making the bigger bucks as a full-time partner. Am I okay choosing flexibility over titles and income? It's not a criticism towards any of those people. Just for me personally, my kids were
Right.
young. I felt like I didn't have enough time with them while I was in training. So this was maybe mommy guilt feeding into it as well, but it gave me control over my schedule. And then I started realizing, hold on, maybe I want to do more.
The name of the podcast is The Visible Voices. And you've actually talked on another one of your podcast conversations about your voice. You may have said that you didn't personally love your voice and that maybe you cringed a little bit. I'm wondering how you feel about your voice because, you are CMO of MRAP, which is the most listened to emergency medicine education platform podcast. So how are you feeling about your voice? When did you realize you had it? And when did you start using it?
Great questions. I think most people hate hearing themselves. I mean, I think that's normal. So when I first, Mel Herbert taught me how to podcast. This was, 14, 15 years ago. I hated it. It was like nails on a chalkboard. Hated it. And yet you get used to listening to your own voice because you all have to learn how to edit your own audio. And so, you listen to your voice often. I'll call consultants or some people now and they'll say, oh, I can recognize you from your voice. And I always apologize. I'm like, I'm sorry for that. I apologize for that. I mean, it's fine. I don't love, I don't think anyone loves to hear themselves speak. I feel the same way now that we do video format, media. Same thing. I hate watching I don't know. I think it's important. What's most important is that we get the content out there. I actually love being the host because of that. I'm trying to navigate the conversation. I'm rarely the guest. I think that that's also a different skill set. But yeah, for me, it's not really about Misa's voice. It's about what I can help um, garner, learn, information gather, and curate that in a way, in whatever format, that is, digestible and tangible and to the point. Like we're here to teach EM docs, and there's this curiosity and hunger to learn for anyone doing critical care. Because yeah, when you have a patient die in front of you, there's, you're anxious to learn more about that scenario so that next time you feel more equipped. That's the goal, and we try and do it. I think the important thing about your voice, I remember having a conversation with Rob Orman about this, who's a fabulous podcaster, is, he's goofy and kind of funny. Mel is also very funny. I'm not funny, but I'm real. And so I think it's really important for anyone listening who wants to be a podcaster. And I've coached this for many physicians wanting to do this, is like, you just have to be genuine. I think people hear through the nonsense. If you try, like if I tried to, say some funny joke, it wouldn't be funny. It's just not me. So I think being genuine, being real, that's what matters. And then you have to find the funny people, put them around you so that it's not painful to listen to. But yeah, that's how I feel about it.
I would be remiss if I didn't dig a little bit deeper into your role as CMO. Can you tell us about what you do the day to day and about the business entrepreneurial aspect to what you can bring and what you are bringing to MRAP?
So I love this role. I think if there was a role that was designed for me, it would be this, especially at this season of my career. So I've done the audio podcasting for 14 years. Love it. Still love it. I, help make video production, various videos, whatnot. Love that too. Happy to contribute, texts, writing, papers, whatnot. But at the end of the day, Risa, what really gets my juices flowing nowadays is a couple things. One, building teams. So we have amazing employees at Emirates. We have 50 employees, and then we have over 1,000 contractors. The team building, I mean, it's like if there's something that really gets my like juices flowing, it is this, is that I now hear from our employees, now like our communication is elevated, because when you have the CMO role, you get the luxury of the bird's eye view, and you have people working in their individual silos. We have amazing creative people. We're talking like remarkable producers, remarkable sound and video engineers, and yet everyone works in their own little silo. And I'm sure this will apply to other worlds as well. And when you kind of work in your own silo, you don't get to see the bigger picture. And when you do see the bigger picture, you're like, oh, hold on, but this team's already doing that. And that team is doing the same thing. So if you two start talking, we're going to get a lot more done. I started in November. We're about, 9 months in. In 9 months, I would say that our teams are now optimized in terms of their communication, their collaboration, the cross pollination are the words I love. Taking a little blip on audio, and oh my God, did you know we had a little video for that? And who would have known unless you had someone kind of with their, like an octopus with their hands in all the pots. So now that those channels are being developed, I hear from my team members that they love it, that they feel less isolated, right? We're a remote company. So this culture of working from home, which is fantastic, but the downside is you don't get that people connection. And to me, that is everything. So I really much enjoy that. Apart from that, I think the other thing that really tickles my fancy is the biz dev. So I love entrepreneurial things. I love thinking about where is MRAP going in the next 10, 15 years? What are we doing to keep the gold standard high? What are we doing to keep elevating not just our products, but how is the user changing? I will say the new learner, the millennial Gen Zer, or yeah, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whatever, the younger generation versus the older, almost pre-retirement folks, that's a very different generational gap of how we ingest education. So how do we keep up with that? Those are the things that keep me up at night, but in a good way. So I'm loving it. The biz dev, the team building, these are all the things that I'm really, really loving.
Yeah. I'd love to hear one success story that you would attribute to yourself and your leadership in terms of either the communication or the business development.
I think it's the small things. Like one of our employees, she came to me early on and said, I feel sometimes intimidated because I'm the youngest employee here. And I said, well, why is that? And I said, do people make you feel that way? No, she just said, I just feel like she leads our social media. I feel insecure about it because everyone seems, so much older and so much more sophisticated. And I said, no, absolutely not. Like, in fact, on the contrary, we need your young perspective, your young mind. You're much closer in connection and age to our newer, younger learners. And so I actually find you pivotal, much like every single person is pivotal, but her role specifically. And you could see like an aha moment for her, which was so fun. I love that. And then since then, giving her more autonomy, more responsibility, the ability to interact more. Again, she was one that was working kind of in a silo with like maybe one person. And again, just sort of developing a mini team around her, interacting with the, person who does the newsletter and the person who does the video production. And so now we have an entire social media committee team, and it's 6 people, and it's a group effort, and it's fun. And so that's what I mean. It's small little wins like that. But certainly our video production has gone from like 2% to my team would say over 100%. We're cranking out stuff night and day. There's a lot in medical education that is happening, and emergency residencies, for example, are going from 3 to 4 years potentially by 2027, 2028. It's a little bit controversial. So we're pivoting to that, and we're trying to get ahead. So again, everything is about sort of staying ahead and keeping our finger on the pulse. Also listening to what our community doctors need versus what the academic doctors need, and really making sure that the seasoned clinicians have important content, and the emotional nurturing that I think is more important today than any other day. I think, we talk about burnout a lot, but that's a big one for me personally, having burnt out in the community setting. I think that's one that resonates. So anyway, there's a lot that we're doing, and I think, keeping not just the education, in an intellectual format, but making it's really important for all of us that our listeners feel heard and feel like we have a safe space and they have a safe space. And it's okay to say I'm burnt out, and it's okay to say that I'm struggling, and it's okay to say that I don't know something. And we are a community that feels the same way. And so
Yeah.
we're here to help each other.
As a close, I'd love, you've shared your journey, your professional journey with ups and downs. And, I'm so delighted that this is sort of the position, the role that is made for you and that you're very, very fulfilled. What do you do for your own ongoing self-care and making sure that you don't get into that space of deep burnout again?
Oh, that's a good question. So my self-care routine, Risa, I would say has been upped significantly. I burned out clinically. I was working 16 shifts a month and for over 4 years. And for the community doc who's done that for 20, amazing respect and hats off. I realized that it was slowly killing me and I needed to do something. I'm middle aged at this point, and it's time for me as I near 50 to, start taking better physical care of myself, mental care of myself. So I exercise regularly, but even the exercise routine has changed. I used to be a hit work at Orange Theory kind of person, and now I do long walks, I do Pilates, I still lift weights 3 days a week. But so the working out is critical. I think that's the stress release is key. Obviously diet, all the things. And then connection. For me, I'm, whether it's talking with a group of work friends or girlfriends or colleagues like you or whoever, I mean, that to me is a form of therapy and outlet. So it's all those things, I think. And then my kids keep me, on my toes. At the end of the day, they're my most important job. And so, trying to raise two now bright-eyed, bushy-tailed teenagers through this role is not an easy role. It's always humbling. So I don't know. They keep me sane.
For audience members that want to know how to follow all the ongoing developments and innovation with MRAP, what's the best way to do that?
So, of course, all of our social media platforms, LinkedIn has MRAP Inc. is our handle. Everywhere else is MRAP, EMRAP. And you can follow me as well, of course. But at the end of the day, what I want to tell your listeners is that whether you're an emergency physician or not, but you have aspirations to do something different, maybe something you've never done before, my encouragement is always try it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You learn that maybe flopped at it. I've failed many times as well in other ventures. So I think it's important just to keep trying, keep growing, put yourself out there, take the risk, and see what happens.
The Visible Voices podcast amplifies voices in the healthcare, equity, and current trend spaces. Our team includes Dr. Giuliano DePortu and me, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Find me at Resa E. Lewis MD on social media or visit thevisiblevoicespodcast.com. Find us wherever you listen to podcasts and watch our episodes on YouTube. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect the opinions of their institutions. Information shared here should never substitute for clinical judgment or for medical advice. Together, we're making healthcare more equitable, one visible voice at a time.